My project is a 24/7 emergency buoy, which is situated in rip-prone areas and at unpatrolled beaches. And the main idea is that it helps to stop drownings and to improve response times for rescues which happen at unpatrolled beaches and in those rip areas. It has a button which is connected to emergency services, so when it's activated, it alerts SurfCom and hence it alerts 000 so that people can get down to the beach in time to help the rescue. It also has handles on the side of the buoy for a flotation device, so if someone is struggling, they can hold on somewhere to avoid drowning. And it also has a light, so it's easily visible in the water. I've been involved in surf life saving my whole life, so I've always had a passion for the beach and for helping others at the beach. But I've also been involved in a mass rescue where there was a drowning and unfortunately one of the patients did not make it. A lot of things that are out there nowadays are only available on the land, so people who are in the water when it's dark or it's after hours and there's not really anyone on the beach, it's very hard for people to get attention if they are in trouble in the water. The process for developing my initial design idea was I looked into existing ideas to see what is already being done and what is working well and not working well. So I knew that I wanted it to be in the water 24/7, so the idea of a buoy came around, and then I wanted it to be able to connect people to emergency services as well as have flotation. So the whole buoy with a button and railings and a latch for safety equipment came around pretty quickly. I also went and talked to some people early on in terms of surf life saving state operators just to get their feedback on the design and how feasible it really was. Initial research I took for the design was I looked into rescues which happened recently and tried to pinpoint key areas that were obvious in all of the rescues, and one key area was response time as well as the rescue happening after hours and at beaches where there was no existing life-saving services. That way I knew that I wanted to have a button that people could press to alert emergency services so it stopped relying on other people being at the beach. But I also wanted to have something that was situated in those high-risk areas as kind of a surf life-saving service without there needing to be anybody actually on the beach. I really wanted to create kind of a latch on top of the buoy which opened up to rescue equipment like a flotation device and fins, so that way if anyone was in trouble they had the access to a flotation device. That's what really informed the whole life-saving component of the buoy. However, when I was researching this and I spoke to more surf life-saving people at state, they told me that the actual latch on the top of the buoy probably wasn't going to work because of all the waves coming down. It created safety issues, which was a big part of my whole design because I had been working so much on this buoy with the latch design that when I got told probably take that out, it was a big kind of step forward because I needed to then change my design. For the research component, originally I was looking into actually building my buoy from materials that they use for regular buoys, like polyethylene. So I was going to get like a sheet of polyethylene and just like build a buoy from there and then work around that. But with research, I found that to be a pretty costly avenue and pretty hard to be able to, first of all, access those resources, but also create that buoy. But I did do a lot of research in terms of the materials used for buoys, the shape of buoys, the sizes, etc., in terms of their buoyancy and stability and durability. But from that research, it became apparent that it would be difficult to create the buoy from scratch. So I started looking into different ways to create it in terms of I went onto YouTube and looked at DIY buoys, and from that I realised that I could probably 3D print the whole buoy itself. So I then went down the avenue of 3D printing with PLA plastic, which proved to be quite a good option in the end because that's what I ended up doing. As the main part of my buoy was just 3D print, I went to my local store. So you can get a 3D print from Bunnings, J-Car, a lot of those warehouse stores. So I went to my local store and got 3-meter rolls and stuff like that with all the colors I needed. And my school had a 3D printer which made accessing those resources very, very easy because they were just at school and at the local shop. I just think a good tip for sourcing all these materials is finding materials which you can access locally, trying not to rely too much on ordering online because sometimes that can be a bit iffy, and always just making sure you have a list of everything you want to get from the shops before you actually go to the shop so that you can tick it off as you go, so that when you get home you have everything rather than going home and being like, oh, I forgot screws or glue or something like that. I created prototypes, so 3D models of my boy, starting from the real basics. So at the beginning I made cardboard and foam options, and that was great to understand shape and size. So I went from like a circular foam boy to a rectangular cardboard boy. Once I was happy with the cardboard rectangular shape, I then 3D printed a smaller scale of my boy, so proper 3D print material, and that way I could understand aesthetic, function and shape because I had the whole hard kind of shell and I could paint it with colours that I wanted to see how they worked against the ocean. For research and modelling, I also gained feedback from state Surf Life Saving members, school teachers, and also tested a bunch of different shapes of buoys physically in the ocean. So I would take my prototype down to the beach and test it in the actual waves to see how the shape and size held up in the waves. For documenting this, always take videos, always take photos. The number one thing I would say is if you're doing anything, even if you're just sketching, I would always just put a time-lapse video on, or I always took a photo because you'll need it later when you're documenting and creating your video. So I found it really helpful to plan out the aesthetic and the layout of my folio from the very beginning. So I made my folio on Canva because that was really easy to be able to have icons, pictures, text wherever you wanted it, to just lay it out really aesthetically. From the very beginning, I put all my information onto Canva. So that way I was making each page read really well and really aesthetic as I was going. And that made that when a due date came up for the assessment or even the HSC at the very end of the year, I had already done all of the layout, all of the aesthetic and the whole folio aspect already completed. I made headings and subheadings based off that criteria. So you'd have a heading that says project evaluation, and then subheadings would be evaluation of resources used, evaluation of aesthetics, evaluations of function, and that all came from the marking criteria. My teacher was really helpful because she also gave us questions which were informed by the marking criteria, which I could cross-reference my own questions with. I would document my justifications for the resources used by creating a table for each category, including justification of human resources, justification of materials, justification of tools and techniques, etc. I used a key, so I actually had icons for each of those three things. So I had a spanner icon for the skills, I had a light bulb icon for the problem solving that I had learnt. So wherever I had a skill that I could identify, I wrote in a little purple text box the skill, and then I would put this icon next to it so that the markers could identify that that was a skill. I decided that I would document the production process in my folio using kind of a recipe structure. And I used a lot of images there because I took photos of the whole production process, and photos tell a lot more than words, which was really helpful. I would say I produced around 3 at the very beginning, just out of foam and cardboard and like easy materials, just to gain an understanding of shape and structure, like I said before. And then once I was happy with all of that, I made a couple of 3D prototypes of the actual buoy in a smaller scale. And I was really, really happy with the small scale prototype pretty quickly, so I didn't have to make any more. I just kind of jumped into the actual buoy. I organised my time through a action plan and a Gantt chart. So the action plan was a table which I split into 4 columns. Most time consuming part of the project is definitely the project development and realization. So when you actually start building the project, it's very timely because you run into a lot of complications, so leave a lot of time for that. So I displayed my final product for marking on a plant holder because it was the only thing that I could hold the buoy upright in. So it was kind of a little holder, and I propped the buoy in there with my prototypes to the side to show the process, and then also a little bit of a description about the project and how to use the button on the buoy. I used the guidelines, as I said before, to create headings, and then once I was checking, I had included everything from the marking criteria at the end of the HSC. I went back to the marking criteria and cross-referenced everything in my folio with the criteria, which was helpful to identify any little things I may have missed from the criteria. I seeked my teacher's input and advice in the 3D printing the most. He knew a lot about 3D printing, which was helpful because he gave me lessons and a bit of tutorials because my design was pretty complicated. That was very, very helpful. Always seek the help of your teachers. I also sought the help of Surf Life Saving State members and designers of the emergency beacons, which are situated on land. So these were industry experts and technical experts, which helped me understand the design process in terms of what I needed to get rid of, what would work, what are some other ideas I could add to my project. For example, the latch wouldn't work, so I got rid of that. They were helpful in grounding me in what was actually achievable as a Year 12 student. At the beginning, it feels like you have plenty of time and that you have all the time in the world to do everything, and all the resources you want you'll be able to get. But I think it's pretty surprising that you find a term goes by so quickly and you feel like you haven't done anything, but a whole term's gone by. So I think it's really surprising how quickly time flies, and also how hard it is to get some resources. The actual research which goes into how to get resources is pretty hard as well. Just keep to the time scheduled. As I said, I had challenges with originally making the buoy out of polyethylene from scratch because it just posed a lot of complications in terms of skill level and cost. But then I actually found the option of 3D printing, which proved to be so much better in terms of just ease of use, ease of cost, and everything. I'm really proud of finding the motivation to keep going and just producing a high quality project and being really interested in the whole thing the whole way through. I think you find that once you get to term 4 and towards the HSC, a lot of people lack motivation to keep going. So you've done all this hard work, and then the actual end crunch, people just drop off and don't finish the project and just stop doing the folio. And I think that's where people go wrong, because you've done so much work. Just trying to keep going and just push just a little bit more is the most rewarding bit. And to do that, I would say definitely choose a project which you are deeply interested in and you have some relationship to, because it makes motivation and the whole project and HSC a lot easier when you're really interested in your project. So definitely do something that you're interested in.